Hello and welcome to The Rewind, where we dive into the making and legacy of various films from cult classics to award-winning masterpieces. Today's movie is The Rock, the 1996 action thriller that stars Nicolas Cage as an FBI chemical weapons expert who, with the help of a former SAS soldier turned political prisoner played by Sean Connery, must break into Alcatraz prison where a rogue military group, led by a renegade general played by Ed Harris, takes it over and threatens a nerve gas attack on San Francisco. One of the highest grossing movies of 1996. The Rock made an action star of Nicolas Cage, gave Sean Connery another hit in his late career, made Michael Bay a blockbuster director, and marked the final collaboration between producers Jerry Bruckheimer and Don Simpson. And joining me today to talk all things The Rock is film journalist Paul Rowlands. Make sure to check out his work at Money Into Light. I'll have the link down in the show notes so you can check out film interviews, essays, articles. And yeah, Paul, it's a pleasure to be able to talk to you today about The Rock, another Sean Connery film following up from Highlander we spoke about last time. How are you? And what were your first thoughts of The Rock? Do you remember the first time that you saw this film?
Yeah, I saw it in the cinema. As you know, I'm a huge James Bond fan, so I was excited to see Sean Connery back in a big action movie. Yeah, and I did thoroughly enjoy it, but at the time, I don't think I appreciated Michael Bay's shooting style. I think in the 80s and 90s, I was a bit more snobbish about the kind of shooting style of people like Michael Bay and Tony Scott. And now I love that shooting style because weirdly, I don't think that style is dated.
Right.
When at the time it felt like this was going to date in 5 minutes, but yeah,
I think the first time I saw it was on video. I don't think DVD came out yet, so that was 96. So it would have been video, I'm pretty sure. The good old, trip to the video store, finding out a good a movie. For me, it was very interesting because this was at the time, 1996, I was around 15 years old. So this is the time I started watching movies with my mates. You hang out at your friend's place, you get pizzas, you watch films and all that. I remember I had one friend didn't live too far away from a video store. We walked to the video store, we grabbed some food on the way home. And The Rock was one of those movies that we just have repeatedly on. I think it was kind of like for a generational thing for like Gen Xers out there. This was a kind of like a movie that was just fit right into their kind of time frame. And I remember the first time watching it, just how number one, everyone knew Sean Connery, of course, but Nicolas Cage for us at the time was like the kind of more eccentric kind of art house guy. He didn't really break through into the kind of like more the blockbuster kind of the stuff. This was like his first foray into that. So that was very interesting for us to watch that. And then afterwards, it would be Con Air, Face Off, Gone in 60 Seconds. All of these movies, like this, what made him kind of like a movie star at first. And but that was something that was very new to all of us. And Michael Bay, I think, was just Bad Boys had come out the year before that, so we were introduced to him in that movie. It was just kind of like the way things were action movie wise, the way the shots were made, the cinematography, all of that stuff. But I think what's really interesting about this movie is that we're talking about a Jerry Bruckheimer, Don Simpson kind of collaboration here. And I mentioned before this was Don Simpson's last movie because he died kind of like halfway through production of this movie. When you hear the names Jerry Bruckheimer, Don
yeah,
Simpson, what kind of films do you kind of bring to mind for you? Because there was such a force in the 80s, but the 90s they were just as big and just as profitable as producers.
yeah. I think of Flashdance and Top Gun and that kind of Adrian Lyne, Tony Scott style, kind of on the pulse of modern filmmaking. Lots of flash, lots of pop songs and maybe a smart girls and handsome guys, and that's what I kind of think of. Yeah,
And they're a bit of a star makers as well, right? Because you said before the names kind of Tony Scott and Adrian Lyne, they're really good at kind of like finding young up and coming directors and giving them like these big projects like they did for Michael Bay in this film. I mean, Tony Scott, he owes his career to Bruckheimer and Simpson for sure.
for sure. Yeah, and to his brother, because his brother Ridley said to him, "Come and join my advertising company, and I'll make you a millionaire."
Mm,
And something like a year later, he was a millionaire. So that's a good brother.
he is a good brother. So looking back into the production of this movie, so the history of it is quite interesting. So I was listening to this interview that Jerry Bruckheimer did on the I forgot what it was the show called. Anyway, he was on like a did a whole series of interviews. He talked about how originally the rights for this movie belonged to Joe Roth, who at that time was the head of Disney. He owned the company, and he was like, I can't do this film right now because I'm the head of Disney and such, but I want you, to do this movie. And so they took on the film Bruckheimer and Simpson, but they knew they needed to change a lot of things in the film. And this where it kind of gets really tricky with a lot of things that are going on. And this was the screenplay for this movie actually went through a lot of legal wrangling afterwards, after the movie came out, because of credit. Who was going to get credit for the movie? The Writers Guild of America, which is the kind of the union that represents the writers in Hollywood. There was a big stoush in this film. So on the credits itself, it says the screenplay is by David Weisberg and Douglas F. Cook, and Mark Rosner. So it's David Weisberg and Douglas F. Cook who kind of first came up with the idea for The Rock. But as Bruckheimer said, it was Charlie Rose that he spoke to in this interview. As Bruckheimer said, when they got the script, they had to put a lot of work into it. So one person that they turned to help doing this stuff was, of course, Mark Rosner, who came on and did a lot of stuff on this movie. But also they brought in Tarantino to do ghost writing on this film as well. Aaron Sorkin was
Yeah,
brought in to do ghost writing as well. And then on top of all of this stuff, I'm sorry, Michael Bay said that Jonathan Hensley, he brought him on as well. And Michael Bay was actually really upset
yeah,
that Hensley didn't get any credit at all. He actually went to the Writers Guild and said, hey, this guy was with me from the start of this movie and he did a lot of stuff on this. But yeah, I think it's really interesting how sometimes some of these screenplays for these big action movies, even though it could be credited to one or two people, there's usually around five or six people involved in writing these films, and a lot of times they're either ghostwriters or they're
yeah.
uncredited at the end because of the guild accreditation. I think that's a common thing that I'm finding when I'm researching a lot of these old movies that there's so many names not attributed to the cast list because of some type of union rule. I find it very kind of interesting in the making of films like this.
Well, also you have, when I think of the movie, I think of Sean Connery's amazing dialogue,
Yeah,
and his dialogue, a lot of it was written by David Clement and Ian Lafreniere, who were famous in England, my home country. And Connery had brought them on to kind of make Never Say Never Again
yeah.
less American. And so a lot of his humor in that movie was by them. And so he brought them on to beef up his dialogue in this movie. And when I think of this movie, I think of their dialogue, I think is what I remember. So, and they're not credited either.
They wrote the screenplay for The Commitments, actually, in 1991. They also did
Yeah,
the screenplay
yeah,
for Water, starring Michael Caine, and they did a screenplay for a movie called Vice Versa as well. So a lot of people attributes to the screenplay here, which is funny because I think a lot of people when they think action movie, that screenplay might not be the first thing that comes to mind. The writing of a film, of an action film, they might think about the direction, they might think about performances and action scenes, but screenplay might not be the first thing that people might actually attribute to the success of an action film. Nicolas Cage actually spoke about working with Tarantino on this movie. So Nicolas Cage said the specific line that Sean Connery says to Nicolas Cage, which is losers always whine about their best, winners go home and fuck the prom queen. That's actually a Tarantino addition to the movie there.
that's probably the
But
best line in the movie.
probably is, especially the way that Sean Connery delivers it. But Nicolas
Yeah,
Cage was quick to point out that afterwards he was the one that contributed to line Carla was the prom queen, Carla being his fiance in the movie. So yeah, there's like I said, a lot of things in this movie
great.
here. Um, we should talk about the casting for this film. we got to start. Look, we got to start with Sean Connery. He plays John Patrick Mason. He's a SAS MI6 agent. He's held a federal prisoner because of something that happened back in 1962, I think it was, when he first gets incarcerated in Alcatraz prison. The only person to escape from Alcatraz prison as well. Um, Supposedly, Bruckheimer said it took him 6 weeks of convincing to get Connery on board for this movie. And one of the big changes that he wanted was what you mentioned before in regards to Clement and Lafreniere to come on board and do a lot of the writing of his dialogue. Supposedly, they didn't even stop there. Supposedly, they were used for a lot of other things in the movie as well. Michael Bay was very happy with their contributions to the film throughout the movie. The big thing about this film is that the Bond connection is very interesting in the movie. Um, a year before you have Brosnan in GoldenEye, so there's a new Bond in town. But Connery is quick to show here that the original is always the best, and the links, the theories online and the links to a lot of the things. For example, the character being incarcerated in 1962, that's the year Dr. No comes out, originally in 1962. Him being MI6 SAS agent as well. The links are there. A lot of little hints in winks at the camera throughout this movie. You can't help but think, oh, this might be like if not a little bit of mind games played by Connery towards, the audience, maybe a little bit of an
Yeah.
alternate Bond universe. What do you think of the whole kind of Bond aspect in regards to what Connery does here? When you first watched the film, did you see a lot of those kind of examples on the screen, and did they kind of they just cry out to you? He's doing his old man Bond impression here.
Yeah, well, I find it very, very interesting because, I mean, the potted history of Connery, of course, is that he grew tired with Bond in the 60s and he left and then he came back again and he came back again 10 years later. And I think he used Bond in the 80s in a way to resurrect his career because although he was an acclaimed actor in the 70s, he didn't have a lot of hits. And I think he wanted to stop making money, to be a big star. And it's interesting that he distanced himself away from Bond. And he had this big comeback, Highlander, The Name of the Rose, the Oscar for The Untouchables. And he was
Yep.
dipping a little bit. He'd had a few failures in a row. And so he took this movie. And I just found it very interesting that I don't know whether it was his idea or his agent that they were like, right, we're going to have your career kind of like parallel to the resurrection of Bond. And he took this role. And he's apparently, well, Michael Bay in the commentary for the movie says that at one point Connery whispered in his ear, "I'm playing James Bond. Don't tell anybody." So I don't know if that's true or not, but yeah, and also there's a shared line in this movie with Diamonds Are Forever
Which line's that?
because there's a character in Diamonds Are Forever. It's where he says to when he meets Nicolas Cage, and Nicolas Cage says, "I'm Stanley Goodspeed," and he goes, "Of course you are." He uses that very same line in Diamonds Are Forever. So he obviously knew what he was doing here. There's another link in the cameraman, the director of photography on this movie, John Schwartzman. His father produced Never Say Never Again,
Interesting.
and John Schwartzman's mother is Talia Shire, who
Uh-huh.
played Adrian in the Rocky movies, and his half brother is Jason Schwartzman. But
Yes.
the funny thing is that when they were making Never Say Never Again, Connery hated Jack Schwartzman, his father, because he was never on set. And Connery always said that he felt that he produced the movie because there was no producer on set. It was him and the assistant director, he said. And next thing, he's working with his son. And apparently they had a really good working relationship. So that's a nice coda to the Never Say Never Again saga.
So Connery came on actually as executive producer on this movie as well. Michael Bay had nothing but great things to say about working with Sean Connery. I think he was expecting like someone to be like him to be really difficult and such, but he said that as a young director, that Connery was incredibly kind to him. He really liked, he was open to suggestions and such. There was even a moment during filming where they're filming the chase sequence, and Connery can tell that Michael Bay is not his usual, self on set. And when he asked him, he said, "Well, what's wrong with you? What's wrong with you?" He said, "Look, the Disney people are here. They're going to kick my ass because we're 2 days over schedule." And Sean Connery says, "I'm about to go for a round of golf," because he loves to play golf. He always plays golf during his movie productions. He's very clever that way. But he says, "I'm going to walk
Yeah,
with you into the boardroom, and I'll back you up." And sure enough, he went in there, and he says, "This boy." The quote that Michael Bay says is that he says, "This boy is doing a good job, and you're living in your Disney fucking ivory tower, and we need more fucking money." And we've got to beat the Disney exec said, "Yes, yes, Mr. Connery, whatever you want, Mr. Connery. Yeah, sure, Mr. Connery." And I left Michael Bay alone after that because he stood up for him, which I think was fantastic because there's always, you hear these stories, especially later on with League of Extraordinary Gentlemen of clashes with like Stephen Norrington and such like that. So,
mm,
maybe later on
he
he
retired
maybe
after that.
he just didn't have the patience that he had maybe in the mid '90s, but clearly. He found that Michael Bay to be a director that he was willing to stand up for, to the point where when he passed away, Michael Bay actually wrote a really nice kind of obituary kind of thing in a Hollywood Reporter, just talking about how fun it was to work with him and everything else. I think that's pretty cool
Yeah.
that he did that for him. It was really a good move by the veteran actor here.
I also read in one of Connery's biographies that actually one of the reasons that Connery didn't sign on quickly was he didn't like Bad Boys.
Oh, really? Okay.
He didn't like Michael Bay's. He didn't like Michael Bay's direction. He didn't understand it. So it's great that he kind of got involved with it and got on board with what Bay was doing. You know.
Sean Connery's 1990s filmography is really interesting. So, 1990 starts with The Hunt for Red October. So, straight off the bat, John McTiernan and him do deliver a great job here. It's one of his best performances, I think, as well. Really cements himself as
Yeah.
a leading man again in the 1990s. But then there's a lot more downs than there are ups throughout this decade. Of course, the ups will be Hunt for Red October. He has a little appearance at the end as King Richard the Lionheart in Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves. He will be in. I always loved the movie Just Cause. I don't know if you ever saw that one. It's kind of like a film with Lawrence Fishburne. It's
Yeah.
like a noirish kind of crime movie. I really like that.
Yeah.
Dragonheart does voice work in that.
Ed Harris is in
Entrapment,
it too.
yeah, Entrapment with Catherine Zeta-Jones. But then in between all of this, you had kind of like these movies, kind of like flops, like Highlander 2. Medicine Man was a huge kind of flop around the time. The Avengers, not to be confused with the MCU, but the television adaptation. All of these kind of films just really, and then League of Extraordinary Gentlemen kind of like in 2003 kind of like ends kind of like this last kind of run there. Um, More misses than
Yeah.
hits, but I think it goes to show that the big hits of the 90s for him, Hunt for Red October, um, uh, The Rock, those two films especially. I think there's a reason why they're mentioned in his filmography as some of his best work because even though this is latter day Sean Connery, this is the time, post Oscar Sean Connery, and this is the time where whenever he can get like a few rounds of golf in between sets, he'll take it. He's clearly a man of leisure. He's still working very
Yeah.
prolifically. Like it seems like every year he had like one or two projects going on. And while not every
Yeah.
project was a hit, I think a movie, he just needs one or two movies like The Rock, which made like $400 million to really just keep him in the A-list, so to speak. He doesn't fade away into obscurity. He just very much keeps working and keeps doing his
Yeah.
thing there.
Of course, he was voted the sexiest man alive when he was in like his 60s. So.
The Matt's Movie Reviews YouTube channel is brought to you by TeePublic. TeePublic is the world's largest marketplace for independent creators to sell their work on the highest quality merchandise. With over 1.2 million designs, TeePublic is sure to have something you love. Next one I want to talk about is Nicolas Cage as Dr. Stanley Goodspeed, the chemical weapons expert. Now, interestingly, I came across an interview that Arnold Schwarzenegger did back in 2013 when he was promoting The Last Stand. And when he was asked, was there any movies they regretted turning down, he actually said that he was offered the Nicolas Cage part, but he said that the script was just terrible. He said there were the script was 80 pages, had scribbles and handwritten notes all over it, or the notes saying things like "this is shit, let's not do this page, let's rewrite this." And Schwarzenegger found it to be very kind of unprofessional, the presentation they gave to him, and he was like, "Look,
Yeah,
get your act together." Send me a good script here and maybe we could talk about it because it did have Bruckheimer attached, of course, so it was something he was going
yeah,
to look into. I'm kind of surprised though that it would have been the Stanley Goodspeed character that he would do. Clearly, this must have been a really early version of the
yeah,
character, whereas more kind of like maybe more of a heroic kind of like gun touting kind of guy compared to
yeah,
what Nicolas Cage. Nicolas Cage's version of this character is he's much more of a nerd, a lab rat. He doesn't
yeah,
shoot guns or anything. He's very much eccentric. I mean, Schwarzenegger would have been cool maybe in the Connery part. I could see that because he kind of plays a role like that later on in a movie he did called Escape Plan with, I don't know if you ever saw that, Escape Plan with Sylvester Stallone,
yeah.
where he plays like
Stallone,
a, yeah. So
yeah,
I could see that, but it's very kind of interesting that he could have done this here. But we do get Nicolas Cage in this movie. Like I was mentioning before, more of an art house kind of actor. He has done studio films, but more comedies or romance movies
yeah,
as opposed to
yeah,
action movies. And then on top of that, just before they start filming, he wins the Oscar for Leaving Las Vegas. So
yeah,
he's a dramatic Oscar-winning actor with this pedigree behind him as a romantic leading man, but also at the same time working with David Lynch and all these other kind of like art house directors as well. And once again, the Coppola connection. He is the nephew of Francis Ford Coppola, and also, the his auntie is Talia Shire. So
yeah,
we go back to
yeah,
the whole Schwartzman thing as well. So there's all that
yeah.
kind of stuff there happening too, which is pretty cool. But yeah, I thought it was just really, really interesting casting in this movie, but he pulls it off. I think he did a great job at playing this kind of very anti, not anti-hero, but heroic action hero, which I
Yeah,
think was really cool in this film.
yeah, yeah. And also, I think he developed his character really well. Like some of the decisions that he made, making him a big Beatle fan, making him kind of an analog hero in a digital age, and his close relationship with his girlfriend, and the quirky bits like playing guitar naked,
Yeah.
and yeah, just making him more of a bookworm and stuff. I mean, that's one of the great things about this movie is the characters are really well delineated and kind of developed. And I know you're going to Ed Harris later, but Ed Harris is a great villain, who you don't know what you feel about in the movie, and I think that really distinguishes this film.
Um, Nick Cage, when he was talking about what he was looking for at that time, like roles wise, because he was jumping in all different kind of things. He wasn't like, Mel Gibson or Tom Cruise or whatever, like all these guys, kind of like his contemporaries. He talked about that his image that he wanted to project is that he had no image. He wanted to just do something like he just wanted to go to projects organically without people like second
Mm.
guessing what he will become. But interestingly, this movie would kind of cement a certain image for him afterwards. When you look at the
Yeah,
movies he does after this, Con Air, Face Off, The Gone in 60 Seconds, like all these movies I was talking about before, all these action films until it leads up again to adaptation where he goes back to drama. He becomes an action hero. He really sticks to that genre of film. And I think when it comes to the most unlikely box office action heroes, I think you got to have to look at both Nicolas Cage and Johnny Depp as the
yeah,
personification of that. And
yeah.
no, it's no
Both Bruckheimer
coincidence.
movies too.
Yeah, and yeah, that's right. Bruckheimer
Yeah,
movies. I mean, there's no
mm,
coincidence here. He finds kind of like these
yeah,
actors he's really good at casting, and he casts he has a very kind of broad sense of who will work and who won't. And having someone like
yeah,
Nicolas Cage be an action hero, I think is very inspired casting with the work he
yeah,
does in this movie. Because like you said, he just the way he plays is just as this nerdy kind of like analog guy. Like especially that scene, you forget as well in that scene, he's a bit of a kind of like a he's not a man's man in the movie whatsoever. He even has his girlfriend propose to him as opposed to him proposing
yeah,
to his girlfriend
yeah,
in that moment as well. He doesn't swear in the movie. He's always like he has these
yeah,
very kind of clever kind of things where he kind of uses different type of language throughout the film, and yeah, I think it is a fantastic job in the film. And I think just his eccentricities sometimes don't work in the movies that he does, but it's a perfect kind of blend and a perfect
Yeah,
mesh to Connery's traditional leading man as well. I think you got Connery's
yeah,
traditional leading man, the natural charisma comes with that. Cage's eccentricities, and they come together just like it's kind of
yeah,
like two different ingredients in a dish. You think it won't work, but you put them
yeah.
together, you mix it up, and you get a good serving of something.
They're kind of like thinking about it now. They're both kind of playing different ways of playing a very masculine person.
Hmm.
Because Nicolas Cage is, by the end of the movie, he is very brave and he's smart and he's got courage and he's a gentleman, with his girlfriend and Sean Connery's character is much more kind of. I mean, Sean Connery's character is actually not that likable when you think about it in the movie.
Hmm.
He's likable because he's Sean Connery,
Yeah.
but his actual character, he's just telling everybody to get to f off throughout the whole movie,
Right.
basically. So there's like two ways of masculine energy in the movie, I think, which is interesting, and they both complement each other.
I think for Sean Connery's character of John Mason, the part that kind of switches is when he's about to leave. And then when Nicolas Cage kind of explains to him, there's nowhere you can go. I mean, what are you going to do? These missiles are going to launch and it's going to eviscerate everything, including his daughter, who's played by Claire Forlani, who a very early kind of role for
Yeah,
her in the movie playing the daughter. Um, and amongst these two people in the middle here, you've got Ed Harris. He plays
yeah,
Brigadier General Francis Hummel. Um, he's a really interesting villain in the movie in that he's very much in the wrong of what he's doing, but the intentions of why he's doing it, you can kind of understand where he's coming from. Michael Bay kind of called the character very complex and but kind of like a noble bad guy. He's a bad
yeah,
guy who does his stuff for a reason. And you could kind of see that in the movie. And what's really interesting about Ed Harris, my perception of Ed Harris at the time is that he, even though in real life he's actually very much a kind of like artistic, kind of like a very liberal kind of guy in real life. He plays a lot of these kind of like straight-laced conservative American hero characters,
yes, yeah,
whether it be in The
yeah,
Right Stuff, Apollo 13, which comes out the year before that as
yeah,
well. Like he plays these kind of characters, and in this movie, he kind of takes that image and he kind of twists it. This guy
yeah,
could have been like in another movie, like kind of like very much the American patriot hero, but he becomes like he turns mutinous and he goes against the nation that
yeah,
kind of betrayed him and his soldiers for decades on end. And I think it's a really interesting casting in that way because it plays with his image and he delivers these very villainous. He plays a villainous term, but a villain again that has a sense of
yeah,
you understand where he's coming from, the purpose where he's coming from. It's not greed, it's not power. It's trying to find some type of recognition, and when he fails to do that, it's like a last stand kind of thing. Very interesting character, very interesting writing for Ed Harris to play here.
yeah. And he's given something to play. Like usually, when you have a bad guy in an action movie, you get the presentation of what he's after, and then he's the bad guy and he does villainous things. But three-quarters of the way through the movie, you realize I really like that scene where he's like, "Look, you know what? We played this chess game
Yep,
and they blinked,
yep,
so they beat us.
yep.
So we're not going to fire the rockets. I was never going to fire the rockets." And you're like, "Wow, okay, this guy isn't insane. He's just let his kind of sorrow and his anger take him to a place that he shouldn't have been in." And what I also thought was when I went to see The Rock, I thought, okay, this is just another spin on Die Hard.
Yeah.
It's two people in one location, and they're stuck, and they've got to kind of get out of that situation. But I don't think, especially the sequels, I don't think any of the Die Hard films had a villain as multifaceted as Ed Harris in this movie. So I think this is one of the best action films that was inspired by Die Hard, I think.
Um, uh, Ed Harris is an incredibly intense person. I mean, his performances can be
Yeah,
very intense as well. I found
Yeah,
a clip on YouTube. It's just his kind of the outtakes, the Ed Harris outtakes. He,
yeah,
if he gets his lines wrong or whatever, he loses his shit with such
yeah,
violence, like he's banging stuff and hitting stuff and such.
yeah,
Supposedly, he said like he really enjoyed doing the film and he enjoyed working with Michael Bay. And he said that whenever he was doing scenes where he had like meaty dialogue and and sometimes he'll stuff it up, he always had a telephone nearby because he loved to always. I don't know if you notice it in the movie when he get frustrated, he'll hit the telephone, he'll bang it down, kind of thing. And
yeah,
so he like so Michael Bay will always have a telephone nearby for him to put his frustrations through and just bang his phone over and over, so he could just smash it, which is I think is just fantastic. Um, we got to talk about the rest of this cast. I won't go to talk about it in person, but just as an ensemble, it has to be the most 1990s action movie cast you can think of. So you've
yeah,
got the Connery, Ed Harris, Nicolas Cage, the top
yeah,
three. But then you got
yeah,
David Morse, John Spencer, William Forsythe, Michael Biehn as well, which is kind of like an Abyss reunion with Ed Harris here.
mm,
You got Tony Todd. Has to be the most 90s cast I could think of at the top of my head. Like I know anytime if I put on a 90s action movie, I can almost be guaranteed to see William Forsythe or
yeah,
David Morse in there because they were just like such prolific
yeah,
character
yeah,
actors during that time. And I
yeah,
also know they'll put in good performances, and they did so in this movie. I thought
yeah,
they're fantastic in the film. It's a fantastic, it's a
yeah,
great cast, really is.
yeah. And William Forsythe actually plays kind of a good guy in this.
Yeah,
You know, when you see him on screen, you're like, oh, he's just going to play the bad guy, and but you know, like he did in the Seagull movie.
yeah.
But no, he's actually kind of the good guy in this, and the straight-laced agent that betrayed Connery in the first place. You know, he's the real kind of bad guy in the movie. You know,
John Spencer, yeah.
yeah,
He's which
yeah.
is interesting because I think at that time he was in doing stuff with Aaron Sorkin in The West Wing. John Spencer was. I think he was like the assistant to the
All right.
president, Martin Sheen's character in that movie. Michael Biehn is really interesting as well because at that time he's. I mean, I wouldn't call him a superstar actor, but he's been like big movies like Aliens and Terminators and stuff.
Mm,
But spoiler
yeah,
alert, he gets killed off within the first 20 minutes. And so you don't really expect that to happen because he's a bit of a name star. I think
yeah,
Tombstone
yeah, yeah,
was the movie he probably done before this, which he had a big role in. So you know when
yeah,
he gets killed within the first 25, 30 minutes of the movie, you know that,
yeah,
shit's getting real in this movie. The stakes have just been, gone
yeah,
quite high, which
yeah,
is quite good as
yeah.
well. The production of this film
I
is
read
really,
that he
sorry,
had a, yeah. I'm
go
sorry, I
ahead.
was just say I read that Michael Biehn had a kind of loss of nerves on this movie. Like he
Okay.
lost his nerve a bit because he was playing a Navy SEAL again after the Abyss and Navy SEALs, and he was actually the leader of the group, you know, in the movie. But some of the actual they had actual soldiers, Navy SEALs, playing some of the Navy SEALs, and he was like, "How can I tell these guys what to do, even in a movie?" And also, he said he just was in awe every time he was in a scene with Connery, you know, also when he saw
Hmm.
him on set because this is James Bond, you know. Yeah,
The technical advisor on the movie is Harry Humphreys. So he's a Navy SEAL. So Michael Bay said he and Bruckheimer both kind of said that he was on the set to make sure that actors, even though it's a very much a fantastical action kind of thriller, they wanted to make the SEALs themselves the way they would interact with each other and how they would use their weaponry and stuff. And they wanted that part to be as authentic as possible. So Harry Humphreys was a big part in that movie. So this film was budgeted for $75 million, which is quite a big amount for a 1996 film. And most of The Rock was actually shot on Alcatraz Island, Alcatraz prison, Alcatraz Island. However, what's
yeah,
interesting is that the Alcatraz prison at the time was actually governed by the National Park Service. So they couldn't actually close down Alcatraz. So they actually had to do shooting on the film while the tours were still going on. So people will actually be on tour
yeah.
and they'll be looking down and
Is
go,
that
oh my
Sean
God, there's
Connery?
Sean Connery and Nicolas Cage. Exactly right. So they had to kind
Yeah,
of work around that. At the same time, a lot of the people there, Nicolas Cage, Sean Connery, talked about how when they first got on Alcatraz Island, they said it's actually quite a fantastic piece of real estate because it's where it's situated on the water
Mm.
and the view and everything. But once you get inside the prison, it just turns into an incredibly depressing kind of like an atmosphere,
Yeah.
because it's like almost filled with ghosts in there. And Nicolas Cage also said that he nicknamed Alcatraz Island Tetanus World because I've said of all the rust and steel and stuff that's sticking out everywhere.
Yeah. Yeah.
Another interesting thing about shooting this movie was that Alcatraz is actually a bird sanctuary. So there had to be the National Park Service had to have what Bruckheimer called a bird lady follow Michael Bay around everywhere to make sure that no birds were harmed during the making of this film. So during
I'm
scenes where
sure
they
he
had
loves
to use
that.
like yeah, shoot off rounds and then do kind of stuff like that to make sure that no birds were harmed and that birds were out of the way and everything else. So
Don't
there was a
upset the
bird
birds.
lady. There was a bird. So we had a bird. So we have a bird lady and we have a Navy SEAL. So we have a SEAL, a Navy SEAL, and a bird lady, just all on set here with everyone else here. Um, Don Simpson died halfway into production of this movie. Um, I talked about Don Simpson a bit. I did a rewind early on, like last year, on Bad Boys, and I
Right.
was talking then about just how infamous Don Simpson was as a party
Yeah.
animal kind of guy. He was just a not very notorious kind of thing. Kind
Yeah.
of not surprised that he would die so young, considering his lifestyle and the
Yeah.
legendary exploits that he had as well. So he died halfway into production here. So like this movie is very much kind of like in a way, it's kind of like an end of an era of this filmmaking duo in Bruckheimer
Yeah.
and Don Simpson. I think it's
Yeah.
incredibly uh, it's incredible to think about what Simpson and Bruckheimer as a team put together, but also to think about how Bruckheimer kind of picked up the pieces afterwards and went on to his own to continue to be a very successful producer, especially the Pirates of the Caribbean's
Yeah.
films and National Treasure and
Yeah.
stuff that would come afterwards. So I think
Yeah.
that's a very big on Bruckheimer's part to be able to do that, I think.
But I read that Bruckheimer was actually planning to separate from him anyway.
Mm.
So it would have been the last production anyway, because he was just alarmed by his behavior and his vices, you know. So it would have been the last production anyway, I think. But I found really because I've read the famous biography on Don Simpson. He had a crazy lifestyle. And but what I find very classy and moving about Bruckheimer is that he's continued to credit Don Simpson on future movies, like on Maverick and all the Bad Boys sequels. Don Simpson still gets a credit as producer, even though he's still not around. So it's nice.
I'd imagine with some of these films, maybe like Maverick, that they've been in development for so long that Simpson was just always involved in them, and it was only right just to
Yeah,
have his name on there. And I know this movie it was actually dedicated to Don Simpson as well
yeah.
when it came out. The Matt's Movie Reviews podcast is brought to you by Amazon Prime Video. One of the best on-demand streaming services available, Amazon Prime Video features exclusive Amazon originals as well as popular movies and TV shows. Watch Amazon Prime Video anytime, anywhere. So the movie released June 7, 1996. So we're a few days off from the like it's what 30th anniversary of the film being
Yeah.
released. So the budget was 75 million. The film made 336 million dollars worldwide. To be like the
That's a hit.
fourth. It's a hit, big hit, fourth highest box office hit for 1996. And 1996 had like a number of big films, Independence Day, Mission Impossible, the first Mission Impossible as well.
Oh, yeah.
So this was like a huge movie for that year. The world premiere was actually held on Alcatraz in Alcatraz prison. They actually transformed the prison yard into a theater. They got a big tent out. They got a like a projector in there. They did everything else. So they actually people were watching The Rock on The Rock, which I think was actually pretty cool.
Oh, yeah.
Quite a cool idea. Um, the legacy of this film, Paul, 30 years
Yeah.
on, what do you think people would think of this film more than anything else? For me, looking back on The Rock and rewatching it again to do this show, the two things that came to mind for me was number one, it's quite amazing how Sean Connery um, still had it. And I was
Yeah.
trying
Yeah.
my very best to kind of rack my brain as to which actor is out there right now doing films like this at the age that Sean Connery was and still doing it at such a high kind of degree of success? And I couldn't really think of anyone because of TV and streaming. I think a lot of the older
Yeah.
actors have gone kind of that way. The old
No,
classical movie star is not around anymore. I'm trying to think of that. And the other thing I was
there
thinking
is
of is,
someone.
no, go
Yeah.
ahead, go ahead. Who do you
No,
have?
there is someone, but the reason you're not thinking about it is because he doesn't look old, and it's Tom Cruise.
Oh, yes,
Because
you're right.
Tom Cruise is the age of the Sean Connery was probably when he did The Rock. I mean, 66. Well, we were in 66 when he made The Rock. He's not far off 66, is he? I think he's like 61, 62.
Yeah, you
So,
know
which is
what?
crazy to see.
Yeah, you're exactly
And
right.
Brad
It's
Pitt too.
just
Brad Pitt, although he doesn't do that many action movies, but
true, true. But yeah, you're
he's,
absolutely
yeah,
right, Tom Cruise, because of course the eternal youth look that he has. He
yeah,
didn't go bold like Sean Connery did and such
yeah,
and Grey and
yeah.
everything else. And yeah, I'm just gonna look up how old Tom Cruise is because yeah, Sean
Keanu
Connery
Reeves as
was
well. Keanu Reeves is pretty old.
Keanu. Yeah, you're
Yeah.
right there as well.
He must be
Um,
at least heading for 60, I would think.
The only other person I could kind of think of, but even he is like a famous actor, but maybe not in the same superstar thing. Kurt Russell maybe is another kind of actor I
Yeah,
think is still kind of
yeah,
prolific in that way. But there's other
yeah,
like if I'd imagine that if Mel Gibson didn't get into the troubles that he got into, maybe he could have been of that similar mold as well,
yeah,
because he had the same type
yeah,
of a charisma in there. But it is kind of interesting how so Tom Cruise right now is 63, so he's actually 3 years younger than what Sean Connery was
yeah.
during
It's
The Rock.
crazy.
And now just looking up Keanu Reeves, how Keanu Reeves is, and Keanu Reeves is 61. So that's
All
how
right.
old he is. Yeah.
Yeah,
So very much all kind of in their 60s now. So John Wick and the Mission Impossible films, I guess, will be the same type of the thing that you can compare to. You have someone like Stallone, but Stallone's now 79 and he's doing more TV than movies. So
yeah, yeah,
that's that's something that's going on there. Okay, but still very kind of very impressive to look that the 66-year-old was still doing these big kind of
yeah,
action films. And then the other thing I was thinking about when watching it is, of course, Michael Bay. I mean, Michael Bay will go on to become one of the biggest, directors in Hollywood. I think his
yeah,
quality of movies as he went on dipped fairly down
yeah, yeah,
over the years. However, what I found very interesting, and we'll talk before how there's certain links to this film that's around. We talked about the Connery Bond thing. We talked about the whole
mm,
Schwartzman, Nicolas Cage, back to Never Say Die,
mm,
all that kind of stuff as well. Is that the character that Ed Harris plays in the movie is this general who's disgruntled because his men have been, left to die and given no recognition and stuff like that. And then years later, I think it was 2016, which will be 20 years after The Rock came out, Michael Bay would do the 13 Hours movie, which is the Benghazi story,
yeah,
which that
yeah,
story is about how these soldiers were kind of left behind and had to fend for themselves.
yeah,
And
yeah.
Michael Bay makes a film of that. So I find it very interesting to kind of like the Ed Harris character is kind of like almost ahead of his time because he could have easily been one of those Benghazi soldiers. You could have easily based
Brilliant.
everything
Yeah,
on that. It's a very kind of interesting thing. Um, have you heard about the whole scandal that came about that linked this movie to the whole CIA weapons of mass destruction thing that happened
yes,
with the Iraq War,
yeah. It's
which is
crazy, isn't it?
just crazy for people who don't know. Um, it's a crazy thing where supposedly, I don't know if it was British intelligence or American intelligence, they had an agent who was giving them information saying that Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction in regards to gas bombs, chemical warfare that were encased in the bulbs, the glass bulbs, which
Mm,
was depicted in The Rock. And it turns out he was just full of shit. He was just ripping off The Rock and using The Rock as
yeah,
his source, so and so source,
yeah,
afterwards, which I just find absolutely crazy that a whole war, or it could be based on the intelligence of someone just copying the plot of a Hollywood action movie. That's just mind boggling to me. That's nuts for
Hollywood
sure.
fair. Yeah. Well, I think to me that the legacy of this movie is how great action films can be if you have a really good script and you
Mm.
have good actors and you give them stuff to do. Because sometimes the action genres look down upon, but this is, I think, is one of the shining examples of what Hollywood action cinema can be. I think, you
And
know,
I think the fact that I probably a lot of people say Michael Bay's best film. Would you say his best film overall? This movie, I like this, and
yeah,
I love 13 Hours, the Benghazi story, which is again it's very similar through
yeah,
lines in between those two. Those are my two favorites. Afterwards, he
yeah.
get a little
I think
crazy
so.
with the whole Transformers thing, but I think this movie might be his
Yeah,
best film. Yeah.
I think Bad Boys 2 actually is, I think, a brilliant action film. It's just a relentless film. It just keeps on going, 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 going. It doesn't have an amazing script, I guess, but I'm a fan of Michael Bay. I think that in his own way, he's an auteur because he sees the world in a certain way. He's a visionary, and he puts that on film. And some people might say he's got a schoolboy sense of humor and whatever, but
Mm.
that's who he is, and he makes films his way. And I think that qualifies him as an auteur, and so he should be respected for that. And nobody makes films like him. I mean, I remember I watched Ambulance, and some of the camera work in that movie was incredible. You know, so yeah. I mean, I never thought I'd say this, but I really miss him. He hasn't made a film for a while, and I'm interested to see what he's going to come up with next. You know,
Last thing I heard, he might be doing. I don't know if you ever heard about that. I don't know if it's a toy line or some type of internet meme thing, something called Skibbity Toilet or something. I don't know what it is, but supposedly he's been attached to adapt this kind of thing into a
yeah,
movie. I have no idea how he would pull something like that off. But then again, I had no idea how people would be able to pull off, a Lego movie or
yeah,
a
yeah.
Barbie movie as well. But yeah, I'm just
I
looking
have
at
a
his
funny
film.
story about Michael Bay. Actually,
Go ahead.
I have a funny story about him. So I won't say who told me this, but they were making the Texas Chainsaw Massacre
Yep.
remake that Michael
Yep.
Bay was producing. And Michael Bay was talking to one of the guys on the movie, and he said, I don't want to have just a really good looking girl in the lead. I want someone like Sissy Spacek. I want to have this real earthy thing to the film." And the member of the crew was like, "Yeah, he's not going to do that." And he goes, "No, no, I'm going to do this." And then they went and cast Jessica Biel, who's just like one of the most sexy, beautiful women you've ever seen.
Yeah.
It was like, yeah, well, the intent was there, but yeah, yeah,
That's the music video director in him coming to the fore, I think, or the commercial director in
yeah,
him. He still has those kind of sensibilities, I think, when it comes to casting. But he's like he's made so many careers. I mean, just what's her name? Megan Fox became a star because of him.
yeah.
Will Smith and Martin Lawrence
Shia
became
LaBeouf,
action stars with Shia LaBeouf as well. I think there's so many people to
yeah,
kind of owe it. Ben Affleck was in a bunch of his films as well. I think so many people kind of
yeah,
owe their kind of like careers to Michael Bay for having him being cast in them having been cast in his movies, and for all of the criticisms you could put towards him in regards to his style. I always found that I really liked his approach to images, but I always found that he tries to cram too much things into his movies sometimes.
yeah,
And so when I
yeah,
was
yeah,
watching The Rock, the pacing of The Rock was actually quite good, and
yeah,
the editing as well. Later on, I think with the Transformers sequels, movies like Six Underground and things like that, was just too much going on at once. And I
yeah,
couldn't
yeah,
really just stay on top of it. Maybe it's just those movies weren't made for me. I'm not sure. It just didn't do anything
yeah,
for me. But yeah,
yeah,
I'm interested to see what he does next as well. Like he's got supposedly a bunch of stuff in pre-production. Whether they come to the fore, who knows? But yeah, I mean, I think maybe we might have another Michael Bay movie come our way soon because Ambulance was 2022 when that
yeah.
like
It's a
last
decent
came
movie.
out. And did that go straight to Netflix or was that in theaters? I don't even remember that if it went to theaters or not. Because
I think
2022
it
would
might
have
have
been
had a limited release. Yeah,
It
Yeah,
would have been just after the
it's pretty
lockdowns
good.
in such.
I know Six
So
Underground went straight to Netflix, didn't it? Which is
it did,
crazy
yeah,
for Michael Bay. You need to see it in IMAX, with a big
yeah.
sound and all.
Well, that was 2019, so yeah, again, I imagine maybe COVID had maybe had something to do with that. I'm
Yeah,
trying to remember
yeah.
timeline wise when that all
Well,
kind of happened.
he's an interesting guy in that he's a guy that really wants huge budgets.
Yes.
So in order to get the budgets, he goes to Netflix, but then people aren't seeing it the way it's meant to be seen. But they are getting to see the film because maybe it wouldn't have got made if Netflix hadn't financed it. This is the conundrum we're now. Wouldn't have got films like The Irishman and films like that if it wasn't for Netflix. But you know, you really have to try hard to see those movies in a cinema, right?
Well,
Sometimes
I
it's
think
like,
that's a lot of that's going to change now because Netflix have pretty much said they're no longer allowing theatrical windows for their movies going forward. Just going to
yeah,
be streaming only. So a lot of these guys like Scorsese and Michael Bay and
yeah,
whoever else are looking for the budgets just have to either go by the demand that it has to be streaming only, or you find your money somewhere else. Which
yeah,
I think places like Apple. I imagine that's why Scorsese probably did his last productions with Apple, with Flowers of the
mm,
Killers of the Flower Moon and things like
yeah.
that. And I think Apple's doing his next movie as well. I'm not
Yeah.
100%. But yeah,
Well,
like it's
Apple did
interesting.
F1, and that had a big,
That's
yeah.
right, they did. Yeah.
Apple did F1. That had a huge release, didn't it? It was out for months. So
It was, and
yeah,
I think it rightly so. It's one of those kind of big tentpole theatrical movies that people want to see. Joseph
yeah,
Kosinski's on board
amazing, man.
doing it. I think Joseph Kosinski is like the next guy. I mean, if you look at like big blockbuster kind of directors, we're talking before about Tony Scott and what Bruckheimer did with that. After Tony
Mm,
Scott, you had like Michael Bay and those guys. I think after Michael Bay,
yeah,
it's now I think Joseph Kosinski is that guy who's giving us the
yeah,
big tentpole kind of action things.
mm,
He's doing I think
yeah,
Kosinski's doing Miami Vice next to the new adaptation of that
yeah,
with
yeah,
Michael B. Jordan and Austin Butler. So yeah, that would have been a Michael Bay film back in the 90s for sure if he did if he did a movie like
yeah,
that. That would have been fit his approach to action filmmaking for sure, especially in
yeah,
regards to what he does in Bad Boys shooting in Miami. I know I wasn't Bad Boys 2, like a lot of that based in Cuba as well
yeah,
as Miami. Yeah,
yeah, yeah, yeah. I think it's also this film has also a kind of a dark legacy in that, like with Pirates of the Caribbean, you take like an actor who's a character actor and you make him a movie star and you
yeah.
give that guy so much money and you change his career so that he's making all these massive paydays and these franchises. And it messed up Johnny Depp because he's got all these financial problems and stuff now. Whereas before he was making 1 million a movie, which was a nice level. And Nicolas Cage got the same thing. He was bankrupt, wasn't he? And
Hmm.
he's having to do a lot of B movies because he got this lifestyle that he started probably because of The Rock, you know. So it does have a kind of a dark legacy where you take these actors and you make them into these action stars, and it leads into these lifestyles that's kind of can create problems.
And the other interesting thing about this film, which we haven't even mentioned yet, this is a Disney movie. I mean, it was released by Disney, which is kind
Yeah,
of weird to think that once upon a
yeah,
time there were movies like The Rock and The Three Musketeers with Charlie Sheen and Kiefer Sutherland, like all of these kind
yeah,
of movies were released under the Disney banner, these live action movies.
yeah,
And I think this movie it was actually the highest grossing live action film for Disney at the time. And then Ransom came out later on in November of that year with Ransom and Mel Gibson, and that
wow,
film actually
that's a star movie.
outgrossed. Yeah, it's a top one, absolutely, and that outgrossed what The Rock did. But again, 1996, strong year. It really was a strong year, especially for genre action, big budget kind of action
Yeah,
movies. Because you had this
yeah,
movie, Independence Day, Mission Impossible, Ransom, we just mentioned, a whole bunch of really, really, really strong movies here.
yeah.
Yeah, for everyone listening out there, The Rock, if you haven't seen it, I don't know what rock you've been hiding under, but watch The Rock. Well, I really recommend it. It's on Disney Plus, like I said. That's where I watched it. Yeah, I highly, no doubt, Paul, you and I are highly recommending people to watch this movie if they haven't seen it. It's
Yeah, yeah,
um it's a
fantastic. Yeah,
tentpole
very
movie
good.
for everyone involved in it, from the producers to the filmmakers to the actors
Yeah,
as well. I think it's just a fantastic, fun film. Having watched it again recently, I forgot how much fun this movie was, and I
Yeah,
think something that's kind of
yeah,
missing from movies these days is kind of like having that fun action film out there. I know you and I both
yeah,
seen Masters of the Universe. I think
yeah,
they kind of tapped into that fun kind of action, but that film is more aimed towards
yeah.
like
It's fun.
12,
Yeah,
13 year
very good
olds, but
script.
this movie was like towards the 15, 18-year-old kind of market. And
Yeah,
I think we need more of those kind of
okay.
films out there to get teenagers and such to
Yeah,
get their action fix on the big screen. So
yeah,
yeah, I definitely
yeah.
recommend this
Well, I had
film.
a
And
question for you.
go
Yeah,
ahead.
I had a question for you. Why do you think that, like, in the 80s you had Adrian Lyne and Michael Bay and Tony Scott, all these kind of flashy directors who all the critics said was all substance, sorry, all style and no substance. Why do you think that today those films play so well? Like, I saw Top Gun, the original in IMAX a couple of weeks ago, and the movie just looks like it's come from outer space. I mean, it's just such a visionary style. But at the time, I think even people who loved it thought, well, okay, in 5 years' time, this is going to seem really overly slick and outdated. Why do you think that it's those movies play so well and look so great now?
I think that at the time in the 80s, a lot of the critics were still comparing the films of the 80s to the films of the 70s, like the heyday stuff where it was
Mm,
more grittier and such.
yeah,
And I think they saw kind of
City
like the
Limit.
80s stuff. Even someone like Tarantino always disparages like 80s movies all the time. He says like it was like the worst time of filmmaking, which I don't agree whatsoever. The directors that came from it, the actors, the movies,
Yeah,
I think it's just a fantastic era for cinema. And I think also having a lot of these directors come from like commercial backgrounds or music video backgrounds,
yeah,
kind of like personified a lot of what people had like perceptions beforehand of what a film would look like. Whereas today,
yeah,
the way that movies are made today, I think it's like again kind of like looking back. Well, look, the 80s has been kind of like in vogue for like quite a while now. The whole retro kind of thing has been quite popular. But the way it was shot on film, Tony Scott especially, use of smoke and stuff like that, the way it was
mm,
edited, and also the fact that there was actual movie stars that starred in these movies. Like these days,
yeah,
like who are the new movie stars these days? Ryan Gosling, yeah, okay, you could say someone like that.
yeah,
But the unfortunate thing these days, it seems like that the movie star or the concept of the movie star has been diluted because they take on so much TV work as well. In the
yeah,
80s and the 90s, you had your TV actors and your movie actors. And you want to see your movie actors, they'll be on the big screen and they'll be in these
yeah,
big movies. Today, you just don't
yeah,
have that. Um,
yeah,
and I think that when you look back in the 80s and you just see the style, you see the art, which at that time, I imagine a lot of people saying wasn't art. They're probably just saying it was too glossy, it was too commercial, it was like too, too neon or what have
yeah,
you. These days, that stuff looks awesome because it was shot on film. And you had these directors who had a great eye just bringing this
yeah,
stuff to the fore. I mean, the Tony Scott films, for example, I think like the way people look at them now, if you put like, I know Top Gun, you just saw at the cinema the re-release of it as well. But if
yeah,
you put his other films up there, like
yeah,
what's it called, Crimson Tide or Days of Thunder
yeah,
and all those things, I'm sure they're going to look fantastic on big screens these days, especially compared to where
yeah,
certain films are shot now. And it's funny how a lot of filmmakers these days are going back to trying to shoot on film again because digital has its place, but I think when it comes to the big screen itself, digital
yeah,
just digital for me should always just be for TV, for streaming. That's fine. But if you want to make
yeah,
something for a big screen, get film back out there.
yeah,
That's why Nolan's doing it. That's why all these guys are going back to
yeah,
doing it. Paul Thomas Anderson as well. They're getting back
yeah,
to using film again. And I know film has a
yeah,
lot of limitations in regards to cutting and how fast you can't do in cutting and stuff like that some of these directors like to do. But yeah, I imagine that at that time in the 80s, a lot of people were just unfairly were just saying, oh, it wasn't like what Freakin did. It wasn't like what Bogdanovich did. It wasn't what like Coppola did. And because those things in the 70s was such a breakthrough kind of moment, I still stuck in the head of a lot of these critics and such. But those
yeah,
movies in the 80s, they were successful because the people of the 80s, the people actually bought tickets to watch the movies. They knew like these are our movies and this is the stuff that suits our style and
yeah,
our kind of like our concept of what entertainment is. And these
yeah,
days, I don't know if anyone knows what their concept of entertainment is. It's hard to say. There's so many fads that come in and out. Now it's the
yeah,
YouTube filmmakers are becoming big. They're making these
yeah,
movies for $1 million and making $100 million. Does that mean now we're going to get like a whole barrage of people, studios looking at every YouTube short video and getting these people to do movies now? People are going to get sick of that really soon as well. That
yeah,
stuff from the 80s, those directors, that has
yeah,
staying power. I don't know what has staying power these days. So I think staying power is a big thing that goes a long way, especially for
yeah,
people growing up and listening. It's like even listening to music. Why do you think people are buying vinyl? People are buying vinyls
yeah.
like in record numbers now
They want those
compared to before.
imperfections. They want the grit.
Exactly. Yeah.
They
Exactly.
want
They
they
want
want
the
some kind of tactile thing, like a warmth. It's like I'm getting sick now of all these. I always rush out to watch all these 4K remasters,
yeah,
But I saw Scarface last week, and it looked amazing, but it looked too amazing because
right.
I remember seeing it on VHS, and it felt really gritty and dirty, and you're making these films look too clean. The
Hmm.
Terminator 4K looks just there's no grit to it anymore,
Yeah.
and
And
it had a
Terminator was
tactile
like
quality
made
when
for
you
like
saw it on VHS.
Terminator was made for like $1 million, right? I mean, it was like this
Yeah,
low budget kind of like very high concept kind of like thing made together with sticky tape and super glue and put it all together, very practical in the way it was shot and
yeah,
everything. You need to have that kind of that texture to it that just kind of that tells you like this is a work of a certain craft. And
yeah,
you don't want to take it's like taking a an old painting or something and then touching it up with today's kind of like stuff and making it all glossy and such. It just doesn't work.
yeah,
You need to have that original texture to it. But I
yeah,
think it's cool though that you know um, especially when it comes to like re-releases in movie theaters. A lot of these
yeah,
kind of classic movies do come out and do get a transfer,
yeah,
if anything, because of projectionists. The projectionists can't do film anymore. A projectionist these days is just a kid that presses play in a machine, and the
yeah,
file will do all the rest of the work itself. So I guess it needs to have those high transfers as well. But yeah, you are right. I personally believe that people just really love the craft and the feel and the texture and just the fact that people used to make things, like with
yeah,
just very much a hands-on kind of concept with
yeah,
filmmaking. And not to say that it isn't like that today. It's just the technology just makes it so a little too perfect. And I think people kind of seek kind of like those little imperfections that they're looking for in the past and the craft that comes
yeah,
from it as well. So yeah, thanks for asking the question. It's a good question to ask. Yeah.
yeah. Something I ponder quite a lot. Just wonder where we're heading.
Who
Because
knows?
you get like 4K of cruising or something as well, and people are like, oh, it looks so beautiful, and you're like, I don't
Is it
know if it's
supposed to?
meant to look beautiful.
I don't think
It's
we're
meant
supposed
to make
to.
creep you out.
I don't think we're supposed to be watching Al Pacino dancing with a leather vest in an S&M bar. It look beautiful. It's supposed to look, gritty and sweaty and everything else.
Yeah,
And
you're meant to like
yeah.
fear for your life kind of thing. Yeah,
Well, I thank you again for joining me to talk about The Rock. I love this film. It's a great film. It's hard to believe it's been 30 years. I remember watching it on video
yeah.
30 years ago. All of these films, Paul, they're getting old like us. What are we going to do? I don't know.
I know it's crazy. I mean, it's what Never Say Never. I mean, Never Say Never Again was 1983. I mean,
Mm,
like Pierce Brosnan became James Bond 30 years ago. You know,
yeah,
I think this year's the 20th anniversary of Casino Royale.
yeah, that's
Daniel
right.
Craig
And
was James Bond 20 years ago. It's like,
that's right.
wow,
Yeah.
he still feels like the incumbent Bond, even though he's not. Yeah,
Mm.
time waits for no one.
Thank you for watching the Matt's Movie Reviews channel. Please subscribe for more reviews, podcast interviews, and exclusive content.